A favorite time of me in Apex was in 1971 when I was a member of the Apex, JCs. And one of the projects for the JCs that year in North Carolina and parts of the South was to these small towns to form rescue squads to provide transportation to the hospital for those that were in need to get there quickly or had to be bedridden or whatever. So we started that 12-hour first aid course in July and ran the first call the first Tuesday night in October. And I ran the second call. I didn't run the first one. The first call was a febrile seizure at the old Apex Hospital that was out there on Hunter Street where the fire department is today, on that land, on that property that belonged to the county back then, and it still does. There were several of those, 5 or 6 of those around the county, but they didn't have emergency departments. If you had your we had 4 family doctors here that fully supported us because they would get called and they would meet you there if you could find one. And it had to be your doctor usually. So that was a proud minute. All volunteers, the town supported us. Where the present fire department building, the old EMS building stands today, still being in use. Mr. W.J. Booth and his son, Apex Lumber Company, actually gave us that property and to build a building on. We didn't have any money. We didn't know we were going to build a building. The town furnished us a meeting place at what is now the Halley Building. And so they were certainly proud times and memorable times. I ran the second call of a wreck on a Sunday afternoon up here on 55 at Carpenter. Had called a Raleigh truck out that was, they had contracted with a private firm that did this kind of thing and had 2 trucks in the whole city to work the whole county if need be. They came out. Another one that I remember well was a bus wreck out here on 64 that we've talked about a little bit earlier, but right there where I live, just past where I live today. A Greyhound, it's been raining a little bit, Greyhound bus, charter bus ran off the road. They were already doing that construction of 4-lane at that time, 1973, and came back on the wet pavement. It wasn't raining hard, and the bus started sliding, and he hit a car head on and killed the whole family, mother and father and a 4 or 5-year-old. Very tragic. Now I'm brand new at this, and this is right there where I'm living. I'm, of course, phone call then, and so I remember that one real well. We had an airplane crash up near Marshville in 96, I believe it was. A small passenger plane, American Eagle at the time, was headed into the Raleigh-Durham Airport and got into the trees over there before you get to Marshville instead of the airport. It'd been raining a little bit. There was 20, there wasn't but a couple of survivors out of that. So that was very tragic. I can remember that as well as I could yesterday, but I can't tell you what I ate for breakfast this morning. So those were the important memories for me, and it's centered around, of course, my children being born here certainly was something too later on. In 1962, I married my wife, Faye. We celebrated 60 years, going on 60. She was born here, raised here, attended Salem Baptist Church from an infant to last Sunday. A beautiful little black-headed girl that was in the choir back then, and Salem, like these other churches, have grown tremendously since that time. So she's a true apexer, although she never lived in the city limits either. I mean, we are almost today, but not quite. Our two children, Greg and Rose. Greg was born in '64, Rose was born in '67. Were both born here in the local hospital out on Hunter Street, where the fire department is today, and by local doctors, two different doctors. As I said, we had 4 doctors in Apex during that time. And Greg was born there. They both attended school here. And Greg went with the highway patrol, still lived here, still lives here today. He lives out Olive Chapel, there where the town owns the old historical house. He joins that lot on the back side. You have to pass that to get in there. My daughter married, gosh, she's got a 25-year-old. She's been married 30 years just about. She lives over in Clayton. And when she got out of high school, she attended UNC Charlotte for 4 years and got out and still was at home with Faye and I until she got married at 28 or 9. So my children are certainly apexers. And Greg retired from patrol about 5 years ago. Works part-time today at the Apex Funeral Home, which is a Brown Wind thing, I think. And so he does some funerals in Cary also, but every now and then does one in Raleigh for them because they have about 5 funeral homes, I think. But I got him working for me this morning. He's mowing grass while I'm interviewing. So, it's home. I was raised down in Lee County. We came this way all the time when I was a child because my mother and father's folks and all my cousins and aunts and uncles were over on the eastern side of this county, the Zebulon area, Franklin County, Johnston County. My mother had a large family, my dad didn't. I've got a couple of first cousins on the Winstead side, and both of them are here in Wake County. Hardly ever see them, and don't see my mother's folks much anymore because all my aunts and uncles are gone, and a lot of my cousins are gone. So I've outlived my parents and my younger brother and older brother. My younger brother did live here. He was 4 years younger than me, so he was an apexer also as such. My hopes are to continue to have the best town of Apex leadership at all levels. And we've pretty much done that from day one when the mayor and a handful of, I don't remember how many people were on the council then. I don't think we called it back then, the council. I know we had less than 2,000 people. And today you're saying that we've got 75,000 from the statistics you compile. That would be my number one thing. I know that's very important, and I learned that with my time as an employee with the town. And you've continued to do a good job of that, and I appreciate that. Continue to provide, or have him say so, in the school system. We've done good. Every time I turn around, we're building a school. I think, good gracious, my taxes going up again. And speaking of taxes, although I'm not into town tax thing because I'm not into town, but my taxes out there on my home on 64 are going up from $2,000 to $4,000, $400 a year, my county tax, till I'm paying more county tax a year now than I did house payment in 1974 in my 1,250 square foot house. And just continued. Sometimes growth is good. Sometimes I wonder, there's so much growth now. I'd like to still be outdoors, especially a morning like this. I might sit out on my carport and watch the traffic. And the building supplies are coming by going westbound. I don't know where they're coming from the building supply place. I'm assuming out on North Salem, but I'm not. But they'll go, and if I happen to be out there an hour or 2 hours later, I'll see that same truck come back by going towards Cary that doesn't have anything on the back of it. And these are tractors, but when you go out and go up I don't go up 64 much anymore, have no reason to. Have friends that were raised and went to school here with us that live up at Seagroves, North Carolina. We visit them a couple of times a year, and that's the only time I ever get as far as the lake anymore. We're back in those early rescue squad EMS days. We worked everything that had an apex address. And guess what? The apex address still goes almost, if not to, Jordan Lake and off both sides of the road. So, but the county's not doing it now. What Chatham County is having to take care of their Chatham County addresses. In all of the places, they started that before I left, and we did that in all the places except one dead-end road off of New Hill, Olive Chapel Road. There was one road out there, I can't remember the name, but that we could continue to work. They were going to have to really come around their elbow to get to the thumb to work that one place. That very few houses there, and it hadn't been developed down there, I don't think. The rescue squad was formed because we had fire departments all over the land, volunteer fire departments, super good, but they didn't do, quote, rescue. And we didn't have seat belts and car safety devices back then. And I lived out there then, not exactly where I'm living today, but across the road on the farm. We had a little 4-room house over there, and Faye and I lived over there, and both children were born there. But we were close enough to the intersection of 55 and 64, and they were crossroads. Well, people coming through, going to Duke or wherever, they thought they had the right of way, and they didn't see these big stop signs there. And we could hear cars actually hit there at 50 single lane roads back then. And it was just one after the other. And that's one thing that really brought the attention to that crossroad. Now, there were other crossroads that we had wrecks, but I mean, those were really, speed limit, bang, bang, and that brought attention to that. So we had to not just be in the EMS business, which we didn't even use that word then, didn't know how to. We had to buy rescue tools, a truck to put them on, and we, Apex Rescue Squad, had those early Hearst tools. I'm sure you've heard that word in the past. You don't hear it much anymore. But we would go there and literally pry cars up, cut them up to get to that person. And a lot of times that person was deceased at that point, but still had to get it where the funeral home people or somebody could get them out of there and go somewhere with them. So we had that latest equipment. I never was big enough, strong enough to handle some of that stuff out here in front of you like this, getting people out, but I knew enough, had took all the training that no, we don't need to cut there just yet, we need to come here and cut right here. So that's how that got started. And then the fire departments began to take on those tools, and they were there anyway, and they had the trucks to haul them on. They didn't have that expense. We actually gave most of our stuff or part of our stuff, to the fire department here at that time. And then we sold a truck and all to a little fire department up north of Greensboro. I can't remember the name of it now. And then we became, everybody was doing that, these rescue squads, and there was 5 or 6 of them. Maybe, no, there was as many as 8 or 9. And they began to do the same thing because we couldn't do it all, not as a volunteer anyway, because we could do it at night and the weekends, but what's going to happen to you from 9 to 5 on Monday through Friday? So we got completely out of that business, and that's when the EMS thing came about for us. It was already there for Wake County EMS. They were never in the rescue business. They would call the local wrecker firm there in Raleigh that those services to come to them. And we had one here, we had a local record guy here in town, Williams Record Service, had a place down on 55, lived right here in town. We could call the dispatcher back here and tell him, call Ed Williams, we need him out here. And he'd come out there with his cables and whatever, and he helped us many times. Save a life, actually, in those earlier days. So it's been EMS ever since. Emergency Medical Services. We were abused a lot on that emergency part. We got a lot of calls. They have a way of actually turning them down now, but just somebody that wanted a ride. We couldn't find anything. They'd tell us, well, I got a headache. Well, okay, do you normally have headaches? Well, yeah, but this one's bad. Well, you check the blood pressure first thing, and some of them needed attention, and a lot didn't, and we couldn't transport over here to the little local hospital at the time. So, and then the Wake Med Cary wasn't there, so we had to go to Rex or Wake Med Raleigh or Duke or UNC, which we still do. We're very fortunate in this area to have 3 major hospitals. Wake Med has one of the best heart centers over at Wake Med Raleigh in the land, so I'm told. And we also have Duke and UNC, all of them within 30 minutes of anywhere we go around here on the ambulance. We can run lights and sirens those places if we have to. A paramedic shouldn't have to many times. We just run lights and sirens to you, but not have to do that all the way there. We trained at the local level some once a month on a Tuesday night. And it was bits and pieces. We would get nurses to come, and then we got to go into Raleigh, to Rex Hospital. The nurses there in the emergency department gave us pretty much all of our training those first years. And then this EMT program came about. That was a 40-hour program, and that just advanced us more into first aid, but into the medical side too, to recognize stroke. You can have a stroke and still be talking good when I get there. So, well, let me check your eyes and see if you can squeeze my hand, all that stuff that we weren't doing. And then in that program, we advanced another step on to the EMT intermediate. So we're gonna let those intermediates start an IV. Not gonna put any drugs in them, but if they've been in a bad wreck, lost a lot of blood, well, get a little IV started, so that's already done when we get to the hospital. And then the paramedic program came about after watching the program Emergency on television all these years, which is in reruns today. I watch them sometimes. And that we administered certain drugs and kept adding. We can do a lot today, especially for that person that's having a cardiac event. You got the monitor on them, same monitors you see in the hospital, exactly the same. When I left, they were about $5,000 a piece, which wasn't too bad for the times. And there's certain drugs we can give for pain, 2 or 3 cardiac drugs on the trucks, and they're checked off every day very carefully so we don't have anybody using drugs that shouldn't be. And that's where we are today. Now, I don't see anywhere else we can go except if we were to really have a catastrophe in the area. We've got a lot of paramedics out there that are practicing that could come in and under the leadership of the doctors and nurses and whatever could provide service on the ground, because the hospital sometimes can't hold them all. We've been very fortunate here that we haven't run into that a whole lot. We've run into it a little bit over a couple of times.